Good morning, everybody. It's Merritt with Master of One Coaching, and we are here every Friday at 10 Eastern Time for Leadership Live Friday, which is where I get to talk to my cool friends and colleagues about all the amazing things they're doing in the world and how they're contributing. And it's a chance for me to highlight some of the wonderful work that they do. And in this time when things are a little bit batty, and we were just talking about that before we came into the studio about how the world is continuing to go mad. I get to bring a little sunshine, a little good news, and highlight some of the great work that's happening out there in the world. And one of these really brilliant and amazing people that I know and love is Kelly Jean Fitzsimmons. Good morning, Kelly Jean.
Good morning. I love this shot in your intro.
You like this shot?
Oh, yeah. No. My niece used to do that a lot when she was little. She would just be like,
yeah. I think I've probably been doing that since I was little too. I could credit the theater degree, but I think that's just nature. Right? So speaking of theater degrees, you and I met through doing theater, and our mutual friend Elizabeth, who I tagged earlier the week, and so this is the portion of the program where I always ask someone to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are. So take it away, Kelly Jean.
Great. I guess the easiest thing to say, or the most direct thing to say, is that my story is helping people tell their stories. Mm-hmm. Like you said, I have a background in theater. I call myself a recovering actress. And
I do too. That's exactly what I got that from you.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Recovering actress, playwright. I also wrote screenplays, but I went back to school later in life to get my MFA in creative nonfiction from a wonderful program, Fairleigh Dickinson University. They have a low residency program. And I just had such a wonderful experience there because it instilled in me this idea of cooperation among, writers in a writing community over cooperation. And so I took my love of theater and performing, and I combined it with this new passion for narrative nonfiction to create the storytelling series that you have been a part of, No, You Tell It. And for that, we go out and we find 4 different storytellers for each show, probably with, different relationships to writing, not just, people that call themselves a writer with a capital W. And, performers, musicians, comedians, poets, people that have the real jobs in the offices, or, I'd always say what is it? I had a term for that, but it's just this idea of people that have stories to tell and may or may not consider themselves writers. And we give them a theme and ask them to write a true life tale based on that theme. And then they work together over the course of a month to develop the tale on the page. And eventually they flip and perform each other's stories on stage so they can step into each other's experiences. And it's a nice mixture of, theatricality and, being able to get the story out of your head and down on the page and then hear it in this whole new voice. That is my story.
Well, and that's one of the many, many things that you do. So you founded No, You Tell It. How many years ago now?
Almost 10.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Crazy. And you've been working with some partners there too. Mm-hmm. Erica
Iverson and Mike Dressel. We were the original 3-headed dog of No, You Tell It. And last year, we had to, like many people, move to remote work, do a couple Zoom shows. And then luckily I have, a big supportive community, Timothy Lindner of Revisionary Writing LLC. He is also an FDU alum. He came in and helped me kind of do all the, figure out the Zoom aspect, extra social media promotion to help with that. And along with 2 other No, You Tell It alums, Noah Diamonds and
Noah was in my cohort.
Yeah. And they that's right. And so they jumped in there as well and helped us put on the Zoom shows. So it's the community's been becoming larger and larger. And all during this time, I was able to take what I learned producing all these live No, You Tell It shows, the Zoom No, You Tell It shows, and, also facilitating the story meetings where we help people develop their true life tales on the page and develop a whole separate set of skills, helping college, high school seniors write their college application essays. And that's been a really great, it's, I don't know, kind of a culmination of everything, you know, myself as a writer, and then, you know, this theatricality of producing Know You Tell It. And now, you know, just the skill that I've developed creating a writer's room where people feel comfortable sharing and trading stories. And so helping these, you know, high school seniors that are so daunted by the college application process, that they, you know, they have a story to tell. It does, you know, they don't have to have, you know, gone to some other country and saved a kitten that was burning, and, you know, something that was in, you know, in old ruins that were falling down. Like, they think they have this huge epic story, but they can find these little tiny seed moments in their life that create a window into their character, and, you know, really let college admissions officers know who they are and how they would fit into their academic community.
It's a wonderful gift to be able to give a young person who's learning or just about to fledge, right, to start to understand the value of their own voice. I think that's such an important and really not just useful, but like, it's a really empowering set of skills, and also just a moment of like giving them the space to express themselves in a way, and helping facilitate that in a way that may have not before. I think that's such a beautiful. I wish I had that. I mean, I had some wonderful teachers for sure. But to have that like moment of someone looking right at you and going, okay, what's important about you right now in this moment, large or small, you know, and how do you want to present yourself to the world?
Yeah, and I've learned doing Know You Tell It and the, you know, college admissions essay writing, that there's a huge overlap in that. You know, I made the joke earlier about people in their, you know, their office jobs or this and that, but it's like, no matter who the person is, I know it's kind of like they think, you know, because I have this different set of skills, I'm not a good writer. And it's not so much about being good or not good. It's like helping each other, you know, bring forth everybody's slice of life is valuable and worth bringing forward. So I, you know, when I seek out people for Know You Tell It, it's not so much what kind of writer they are, what kind of performer they are, or, you know, is it wise to put an accountant on stage? It's more just like, is the person generous? You know, will they, you know, both take in feedback and also support their partner, you know, whoever they are paired with, to tell each other's stories. So it's been really interesting to kind of take, I had a mentor, Sue Landers, who works with Lambda Literary, say to me once, I love this phrasing of it's about like checking your credentials at the door. And, you know, and just being there for each other to help each other find these stories, develop these stories, and then hear them in each other's voices, which bonds people in such an incredible way. Like when I mentioned Noah's name earlier, and your whole face, you know, brightened up, because I was like, oh, he was in my group.
Yeah, so I mean, and that group was incredible just to be a part. I mean, it was such a gift to be a part of it in that period of my life. So I was so grateful that you invited me in there. And we had in that group a college professor and
you had my MFA mentor and professor,
and reputed, you know, published writer. We had a PhD in music, and Noah, who is a performer and writer and has done, you know, just endless. He's a Marx Brothers expert.
Yeah, I once got to see. I mean, there's so much to talk about Noah, but I once got to see him at the Jewish Museum, like just be Groucho for an hour and answer questions as him, because he's so educated and so versed and spent his lifetime, you know, bringing to life the works of the Marx Brothers, and it was just incredible to me to, you know, just to see how quickly his mind works. So then to have him swap stories with Minna Proctor, my MFA mentor, and like, you know, kind of step into each other's shoes when I couldn't think of any two different people, and you know, and what they brought when you know, those stories came to life.
Yeah, it was a real gift for me also, to just kind of give context of like what is possible when we have someone who shines a light on our story, right? And in a way that we wouldn't even necessarily think of. But like when I was making a transition I was living in Buffalo, moving down to the metro area, now in the Hudson Valley, and I was able to kind of dip my toe back into what it means to be a performer at this stage of life, as a mom, having gone through all the things I've gone through, and then connect with all these other amazing professionals, smart, like you say, generous, incredibly giving, and hearing those stories live on their own because they're not coming out of my mouth.
Mhm.
right? They're coming out of somebody else, which is the whole premise of No You Tell It, is giving somebody else your story to tell and perform. And it was just such a really, so thank you for that gift, because it was really a wonderful experience, and it was
Mhm.
edifying in many, many ways for me. So thanks.
Mhm.
I'll put the link up too. I know it's somewhere. I have it somewhere. I'll put the link up.
Yeah, knowyoutellit.com.
Yeah.
And you can listen to podcasts of story swaps from, our live shows, including yours, and, and the ones that we did over Zoom last year. And we're teaming up with Lambda Literary again to do a show for the Brooklyn Book Festival in the fall.
Oh,
It'll be our first in-person show for a while. I'm excited about that.
I'm going to put it, just knowyoutellit.com in the comments here. No, you tell it. There we go. And if you have any questions or comments for Kelly Jean about what she does, please go ahead and put them up here. We'd love to engage with you. Even if you're catching it on the replay, that's okay. We'll come back around and check in. But we're going to continue chatting here about, so what was the, well, two things I wanted to ask, actually. The first thing is, what was the inspiration for No You Tell It? What was the thing that got you to go, oh, this would be a really great idea?
People always ask me that, and I think I'm torn between two answers. And one is Fairleigh Dickinson, because I really loved the program. And I said, like, the sense of community. It's a low residency program. So before we were all online, it was kind of this rare thing of being in person for 10 days. And then you go and do all your coursework online back in your own life. But because of that, it was kind of what you experienced with No You Tell It, because people lived all over the country. They had all sorts of different backgrounds. And we had a tradition of having a new student reading night where people had to get up and read their work. And people would get so nervous, especially people that weren't used to getting up and, reading in front of a crowd. And a lot of us joked about, oh, I wish you could read my story. I wish you could read my story. But then also, I just thought about how unique and almost unfair it was that you worked together for so long in these MFA programs to shape the stories, give each other feedback, build them on the page, and then you're just expected to get up there and be a good reader. And that's where I was able to bring a little bit of my background in. And, so part of No You Tell It is, if you're mixing up people that do a lot of writing, people that do a lot of performing, the writers, help, that you elevate each other. The writers help the performers strengthen their writing, and in turn, the performers.
Oops.
Help the writers.
We might be a little bit. Oh.
I'm back. Are you?
Yeah, there you are.
So I was just saying, I had a friend, the FDU program, that always said that, we help people give a little oomph to their readings. So that was a big drive behind it. And another one is, I have a really good friend who's a performance artist, Carmelita Tropicana, and she writes about her, her father a lot, who is, a revolutionaryist in Cuba. And my dad was actually kind of on the other side with the Cuban Missile Crisis, doing something very mysterious with the Air Force. And so I just thought, like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if, these two people traded stories? If I, tried to tell Carmelita's story and was brutalizing the Spanish, and she's like trying to tell this like chubby white girl story, and like, just, because we had these similarities and differences. Unfortunately, she's so prolific in her work that I've never been able to pin her down to get. I call myself a story stalker. Like, I'm always stalking out people that I want to do. And so it was a combination of those two things. Like, what if these two vastly separate people traded stories, and you could see the similarities and the differences, and then also this idea of helping everyone have a little bit more stage presence and bring a little theatricality to literary readings. Because I think people, they don't realize that they can have a little bit more fun and not diminish the authority of of it.
It doesn't be so serious, right? Even if it's a serious topic, you can still enjoy the telling of it. Yeah. Well, I want to dip into a little bit more about like your work with Lambda Literary, and you've had a couple of really you and I have exchanged some stories about the powerful moments you've had with some young people who are still struggling with having their voice out there. So maybe. We could go on that for a minute. Could you have a special or a certain anecdote you could share about just to that highlight sort of the power of that in terms of giving somebody a voice where they may not feel like they had one before? Or
something that always stayed with me, and I've written about it before, is one of the projects that I ended up doing through Fairleigh Dickinson, doing shows there, is actually going into a middle school in Madison and helping seventh graders write memoirs. And there was a seventh grader there he was just totally stuck and couldn't write anything. And he said the most amazing thing. He just was crying, and he just said that I feel like everyone else's story is like finding $100 bill on the ground, and my story is like finding a penny. And I was like, oh my, I said, please write that down. Like, didn't realize that, you know, that could be a story that, you know. And there was another story too, through a Know You Tell It alum, Brooke White. We got to go into a Unitarian church, and there was a woman that wrote a story about taking her son to the park, and she would just take her very young son to the park almost every day. And he had this favorite ball. And one day there had been a big thunderstorm the day before, so there was a lot of water in the gutters, and the ball got washed away. And she just witnessed, you know, him realizing that he could never have it back, and in this incredible honor of being there for a human being's first moment of loss. And we just, you know, we did it. And this was like a workshop. So we were trading, you know, really on the cuff and reading each other's stories, you know, the same day we met. And it was just, everybody was crying. And so I just take that a lot about, you know, this idea of even the smallest moments, you know, can make the most powerful stories. Because I remember being on a date one time and kind of saying that, and the guy was like, oh, it was a ball. Like, and I was just like, all right, we're never going out again. Next, you know, so this idea that you don't, you know, storytelling doesn't have to be this, you know, you have to come up with the most amazing story that's going to beat everyone else's out and put you at the top of the pile. It's just this generosity and the sharing, and working with Lambda Literary. I've been incredibly, the head of Lambda Literary, Sue Landers, as I mentioned before, incredibly grateful for that team up, because it's just been so interesting. You know, we've had these nights of doing what we call queer storytelling with a twist. And just some of the stories that people have brought in about, you know, just, you know, having to come out to their families, or just, I don't know. I remember one just being in the, what's it called here? Is it still Boston's Chicken? What's the one that I feel like it keeps changing its name?
Boston Market?
Boston Market. It used to be Boston Chicken, like in Florida. But yeah, and just being there, you know, with someone they loved, and then somebody, you know, just expressing their disgust at their, you know, showing affection for each other, and you know, the range of things, but then also just the, you know, stories with so much joy too, that it's never one thing too, right? Like there's no such thing as, you know, exactly knowing what somebody's story is going to be, that there's this, you know, this vast rainbow imagery. Yeah, but it's just like hoping to open up a whole new world for me, that this idea that there's no one way to be any one type of person.
Yeah. Well, that was a great segue into the next question about leadership, because I know that when you and I worked together for a little bit, you talked about, or afterwards, you talked about how you didn't consider yourself a leader. And yet here you are out there in the world leading all kinds of people, doing, you know, through story, but also you're a founder, you are a teacher, you know, you've evolved your practice and your offerings, you know, in during the pandemic, and made an incredible, and had an incredible growth in that. So tell me about that moment at which you started to kind of realize, oh, maybe I can actually like be in a position where other people will listen to what I say, and I can serve them in different capacity.
I talk about this a lot. We had a Know You Tell It scheduled for March 12th of 2020 that, you know, we had to cancel the day before on March 11th. Just got to that point. And it's a good thing we did, because I came down, or I was probably incubating at the time with COVID shortly thereafter. So, you know, and I think more than one of us.
Oh.
It was a similar case. So
a little bit of technical difficulty. She'll come back in a moment, I'm sure. There you are.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm checking mine. I think I'm okay. it's so hard to tell like what's causing the
Yeah.
disruptions. Oh, the
Who knows?
Zooms.
Oh,
I
the
always joke with my
Zoom.
Zooms. I always joke with my students. I'm like, oh, you'd think after a year would have gotten this all down.
No.
But I was speaking of Zoom. So basically, I was saying that when I woke up from having COVID, I felt like the whole world had moved to teaching online and doing these things online, and they were, doing them very well. And I was like, well, who am I to try to do anything? And there's so much free stuff out there. But I had been teaching a creative writing class at the Astoria Bookshop for a number of years. And a couple of the students started reaching out to me and asking if, I was going to start doing things online. And then one in particular, it was, really touched me that she said that there was so much out there, that for free and all this stuff, but she didn't even know where to start. And she always appreciated, how I curated things and kind of, put things into digestible bites, like in the little in-person workshops at the Astoria Bookshop. So I started doing them online, and for a time we were doing them every Sunday. And even when we moved to every other Sunday, we just, really had a steady participation of, 10 to 20 people over the course of a year. And I was really touched by how many people wrote me and reached out at like how much those sessions meant to them, and kind of continuing this Queens community of writers and giving people an outlet to connect with each other. But also, we picked up people as people are discovering from, doing all these online events, from Florida, from Massachusetts, and just kind of like the community built outward into the internet's, the new sphere.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it really made me think too, that I have this incredible ability to make people trust in what I was saying earlier, that your slice of life is as valuable as anyone else's in the world. And it was never about, am I good enough? Is my writing good enough? It was just, connecting and sharing and kind of giving people the confidence to get their story out there.
Well, and again, that speaks to the power of that gift and your ability to present it and hold the space for that. I just, I love that little bit of transformation that you went through, because it was like, I didn't think I could didn't think of myself this way. And yet here I was actually already doing it and didn't even realize I was doing it. Other people were already looking to you, and you didn't even couch it that way in your own mind. So
yeah, and I as a lot of people know, my dad fell in April of 2020 and suffered a very traumatic spinal injury, and I went to live with my parents for almost a year to help them out. So it's like I had these, everyone had huge things going on in their lives, but I had this whole, I always joke that the Fitzsimmons, like the pandemic wasn't enough. We had to add a whole other layer to it for our family. But
another thing, right?
But then those classes, they became a lifeline for me as well. And I am incredibly grateful for that community, because it helped me practice, being an online instructor. And then when I started working with students, doing summer workshops to help students write their college essays, like these kind of like 2-week intensives, a lot of the things that, I practiced and did with the Sunday workshops, I was able to put into practice there and kind of build my skills and really make it so that, kids are just staring at these screens all day. And so I started to think of myself more and more. If I was creating these little obstacle courses that they had to run and be interactive and team up with each other to complete, rather than me talking at them. And they were continuously surprised. I had more than one kid, just voice their pleasure and surprise that, they thought they were just going to log on and listen for an hour and a half, 2 hours. But, it was very much like learning how to use the breakout rooms. I started calling nerd pods, because one of their teachers did. Whoever that teacher is, I don't know where you are, but I love that phrase. And just like sending them in their nerd pods to do these, to learn by doing. And and a lot of times too, they would come back as if they were, I don't know, it was like a big secret that they had talked about other things in the assignment. And one day I'm like, yeah, duh. Like, I want you to get to know each other. Work is not, I assume it's not like I think you're there. That's why I didn't always pop into the rooms. Like, I wanted to give them the space. We're creating this virtual writers room where they're going to help each other and trust in each other to share these very personal stories and give each other feedback in a very kind and loving, but also helpful way. Not just say, oh, this is great. Oh, this is great. But you've got to, say what confuses you and what you'd like to see more of in order for the person to build their story.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So let's, this is the point of the program where I usually ask if you have a golden nugget of wisdom to share. If you had one thing that you could say would ring out after this this conversation into the ether, what would it be?
I'm going to go with a writing tip that I've been discovering more and more, that just unique is universal. Like the more of these like really specific, unique details that you can drum up, like stop worrying about if you're good enough as a writer or the story is good enough. But the more specific the detail, the unique the detail, somehow the more universal the story becomes, the more people can see themselves in it. And that's what we've been discovering, whether it's Know You Tell It, whether, I went into a school recently to do a creative writing workshop with high school students of all ages, whether it's the college essay writing. It's this idea of these little details. And, even if you have similar experiences to someone else, it's just a joy to get to see it through your eyes and hear, your details and what it was like for you.
That's awesome. I love that. It's such a beautiful way to put that. And like when you're talking about the story about the mom who was watching her little boy's ball, I just got that such a strong image, right? And even if I didn't ever had that specific experience, I can relate. Right? We can all relate to that. Like, oh yeah, like being a little kid watching something roll away, or just having that experience of loss and going, oh, right?
Yeah. I never forgot that. I mean, that was so early on when we were doing Know You Tell It, but I never forgot that story just stayed with me. Just thinking of this, this being there to witness a tiny human being's first moment of loss.
Yeah, it's a very cinematic to me. Like I can sort of black and white with the gutters going and the ball in color, right? Very like Schindler's List kind of thing.
The other thing I've learned too is to just never pretend that I know more than I do. Like in the room, the people that have such different lives than me, especially when we've been working with Lambda Literary, and even when I work with these high school students, whose background, especially in Queens, or the parents are coming from all over the world. They, and when we were doing the Zoom workshops online, there were students who were in other countries, and so not pretending I'm an expert in anything. I'm still learning, like what all these different unique experiences that people can have, and these ideas of what have been shaped through us through the common narratives that we experience all the time, whether it be TVs or movies or just the way that social media portrays things. That there's always another layer, and then that's where that unique is universal, because that's what I learn something new every single workshop, every single interaction with these people whose lives I wouldn't have had such a window into otherwise.
It's also, it never gets old, right? It never gets tired. Like to be able to connect with somebody's idea or their personal experience. We are always offered opportunities to delight in somebody, in the connection with somebody else. Yeah, like there's always, if we can be open to it, there is an opportunity to just, like you said, breathe. That there's an endless joy in that connection, and discovering new ways to connect with other people. So whether it's through their own individual stories about a specific incident or their background or whatever. I remember doing diversity work several years ago in Western New York, and the first exercise we would often do is, what is your name? And we would talk about the story of your name, like who were you named after? Like what, I had 5 names at that point in my life. I was named after this person and that person, and we're related to my grandmother in this way, and right, and so there's like this depth of story and depth of identity just in talking for 10 minutes or even 5 minutes about where your name comes from. And then someone else will say, oh, I was named after my godmother too, or I was named after my, my uncle who fought in this war, or I was, right, I mean, whatever it is, who owned a shop down the street, and that my family's owned that shop for 100 years. And oh my gosh, I used to shop at that store, right? It's like there's just this opportunity for connection where people assume that there isn't, right? We assume when we walk into a room that often that we're isolated because when we don't know anybody, and having that moment of unique being universal really opens up the door in such a deep way so quickly if we're open to it. So I love that. All right, my friend, thank you so much for being here today. I delight in you and your presence and work. And where can people get a hold of you? KnowYouTellIt.com. We already talked about if you want to reach out to you about college essays or the other writing work that you do, because you are published several times over. So where can they find all that information?
Kelly Jean Fitzsimmons.com. I always say that all things KJ.
Kelly Jean. I'm going to make sure I type it out right because I'm not a very good typer. Fitzsimmons.com. There we go.
Yep.
Yay!
And
Okay,
I'm
great.
also going to throw in, we have one more, speaking of the college essay writing workshops. So Tim and I, for Revisionary, we created like a free generative workshop just to help students spark story ideas. We have our next one coming up on the 21st, a week from tomorrow. And the registration is there. It's just standout stories.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And but yeah, as we just created that, it's the one thing about all of this online and virtual learning is that way, it's a free interactive session. I think students again are surprised when they show up, but to to help generate these ideas and demystify the process for students, and just a joy to create this resource and make it available to anyone that's able to log on.
Well, it's such a wonderful opportunity for students to have their voices and their stories heard and honed in a way that presents them in the best possible light, even if they feel like they don't have anything to offer. They definitely do. And I love that story about everyone else is finding $100 bill and I'm finding a penny. Like that's such a oh my gosh! Like
I
tell me
know.
about your penny. I want to know.
And the teacher, Mrs. Henry, that I was working with, was so delightful because she said, "Well, 100 pennies makes $1." And I just thought it was so such a window into her personality, because I learned so much working with her, and yeah, it's very interesting, just this idea of perspective and what is valuable. Why can't the penny is valuable?
Yeah, my dog thinks so too.
He agrees.
And he agrees. Well, thank you, Kelly Jean. Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure, and you are such a joy and such a gift. And I just really appreciate you being here today. So thank you for sharing your stories and your work. And please come back, and we'll talk more. Okay, great. And that's it for today's Leadership Live, everybody. Thank you so much again for joining us. We're here every Friday at 10 o'clock Eastern time in the morning to share stories about leadership, about leaders who come from unexpected places, who find their role as leaders in ways that are unorthodox sometimes, or even if they seem traditional on the outside. Everyone always has their own unique journey here to leadership, and what they're sharing out in the world is so important to highlight so that we can understand how we can connect to each other and continue to move the needle and elevate the collective vibration of our society and our universe. So thank you so much for being here. If you have any other questions for me or for Kelly Jean, you definitely can drop them in the comments there. We will go back and pick them up later. And if you have questions about what your leadership journey might look like, please visit us at masterofonecoaching.com. Sign up for the newsletter, and you can always find us back here every Friday at 10 o'clock. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great weekend. Take care.